The navel chakra yin imbalance happens when people are at odds with their own sexuality. They repress their own desires to such an extent that they feel extreme guilt every time a sexual thought enters their mind. Now this has a knock-on effect because one chakra dysfunction leads to another. The type who punish themselves for having sexual thoughts are just as likely to punish themselves for not being perfect 100% of the time, which is a solar plexus yang imbalance. The type who suffers from a solar plexus yang imbalance are likely to grow oversensitive, which is a heart chakra yang imbalance. Now combine this with the top chakras. The type who has a third eye yang imbalance is basically what you would call a paranoid schizophrenic. They're likely to grow ever more convinced of their paranoid worldview that they become dogmatic. Dogmatic types have a throat chakra yang imbalance. Those with a throat chakra yang imbalance become oversensitive to truth. Oversensitivity is a heart chakra yang imbalance. It's a domino effect on both sides. The top three chakras all fall down until they hit the heart, while the bottom three chakras simultaneously all fall down until they too hit the heart. Both sides collapse into the centre, the heart. What we can ascertain from all this is that if your outer field is intact, regardless of whether or not you have dysfunctions in other chakras, you should be safe from demonic attack. So your outer field, generated between the crown and the root chakras, is what keeps entities out. If you don't have dysfunctions in either the root or the crown chakras, then barring the use of some type of high-tech weaponry, you should be safe. Don't get me wrong, they can still sense if you have chakra dysfunctions in other places, because they can see what's in your shadow. As I said, it's like a lighthouse. They will try it, but if the outer field is strong, then forget it. They can't get in. Not unless you allow it in some way. So that about sums up the field and its threefold division in relation to the 3 stages of possession. The field essentially radiates outward from the centre, the heart. It seems reasonable to conclude that the heart chakra is a type of sun or singularity from which the field emanates. The field is therefore a positive polarity radiating outwards from the centre. Now if you recall, I talked some time back about how the Holy Spirit is like a ray of light from the sun, which produces these 7 colours, which at that time I referred to as the 7 individual facets of the personality. Well, the concept here is much the same. These 7 colours are the field radiating out of the heart. I spoke also of the vampire's lack of a reflection, because it does not radiate outwards, but instead draws inwards. Thus there is no light with which to reflect. I attributed the number 42 to the light, radiating outwards and creating the rainbow, and I reversed the 42 to a 24 for the Antichrist consciousness, or the darkness, drawing inward. Now, it could well be that the very same principle applies to the field of a negative or a demonic entity. If their nature is negative, that which draws inwards only, then how could they have a field which radiates outward? I would suggest that perhaps they have some kind of artificial field which projects a false image of a human being, which the human eye decodes as a human being, when in truth it is not. The 5 senses are very easily deceived, as we only see, hear, taste, touch and smell, based on electrical signals, which are nothing more than an interpretation of what is actually there. We are, as Plato so eloquently described, looking at shadows on the wall, and mistaking those shadows for the true forms. But we cannot see the true forms, only the shadows of those true forms. This technology would have to make use of light in some way in order to produce this illusion. Our own field, or aura, is like the sun producing a halo around it, a phenomenon that occurs at a 22-degree angle. So an artificial version would, symbolically at least, be represented by that same number, since it cannot be reversed, unlike 42. So possible resonators include, but are not limited to, halos, sun discs, the number 22, coronas, and a corona means a crown, by the way, so crowns and rings, because halos or coronas are ring-shaped. And let's not forget the apple. This apple logo, being rainbow coloured, is a dead giveaway. The field is a multicoloured torus, so I don't think it could possibly be any more obvious. Now, is the goddess Columbia with a halo emanating from her torch, with the inner and the outer layers. The very outer layer would be the crown/root field. The next layer in is the third eye/navel. And last but not least, that blue haze surrounding the torch is the throat/solar plexus field. The torch itself is the heart. Now remember, the goddess and the dove are synonymous. They represent the Holy Spirit. So the goddess holding the torch is the Holy Spirit in the heart. Unfortunately, the Antichrist spirit uses the exact same symbology. So this being a Hollywood symbol would point towards the unholy spirit in the heart in this example. Hollywood create idols, and idolatry weakens the outer field, as I've previously shown. Anyway, we can add target symbology to the list of field resonators, and we can place atoms in this category as well, as they are more or less the same thing on a microcosmic level, right down to the fact that you can create a charge of electricity by offsetting the balance. The nucleus, with its positive charge in the centre, would be the equivalent of the heart chakra. The electrons orbiting it would be the field itself. These orbiting electrons switch between particle and waveform based on whether or not they're being observed. Collectively, the electrons orbiting the nucleus are known as probability clouds. Since thought plays a substantial role in creating reality, and it is these probability clouds that the thought appears to shape in order to achieve this, I think it's interesting that we tend to use clouds to symbolise thoughts and dreams. That being said, the field is therefore the equivalent to a probability cloud. So clouds are another symbol of this field. Perhaps the artificial field technology makes use of this probability cloud phenomena in some way, in order to produce the likeness of a human being. Presumably, anyone could use this technology, human or otherwise, simply by wearing it. Outsiders would be deceived, the five senses would decode and interpret the field as person A, when in reality it is person B wearing this field, for want of a better word. Now, it's all conjecture on my part, but nonetheless, when it comes to our own fields, an invading entity seeks entry into the heart chakra, the heart being the centre, the vacuum, or the singularity, the sun. Access is gained when the other chakras are destabilised. The end result is like pulling the yellow and the blue out of the green. Green would effectively cease to exist, as it is the sum of its parts. Now, that's not to suggest that the heart chakra literally ceases to exist, but more so that the dysfunctions caused in the surrounding chakras naturally lead to an imbalance in the heart between them. Dogma from the throat chakra leads to oversensitivity in the heart chakra. Impressionability from the throat chakra leads to insensitivity in the heart chakra. Likewise, lack of integrity from the solar plexus chakra leads to insensitivity in the heart chakra. Lack of self-esteem from the solar plexus chakra leads to oversensitivity in the heart chakra. Now, the extreme poles of the heart chakra are, of course, oversensitivity and insensitivity. The insensitive cast compassion into the shadow. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, shouldn't that be empathy? Well, the answer is no. Empathy is your ability to put yourselves into the shoes of another, to understand how they're feeling or what they're going through. We all have empathy, but to varying different degrees. You could have the lowest degree of empathy that there is. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're incapable of demonstrating compassion. An individual is not necessarily at fault for having a lower degree of empathy. Having empathy certainly helps give rise to compassion, but you don't have to understand what someone is going through in order to show that person compassion. Some people, for reasons completely out of their control, don't have a great degree of empathy, but they may still comprehend on a clinical, non-emotional level the difference between right and wrong. They know that some things are just, while others are unjust, and they'll try to meet those standards to the best of their ability. So while in most cases a lack of empathy does lead to a lack of compassion, it's not always the case. So the compassionate thing to do would be to not blame the individual who lacks empathy for their lack of said empathy. Because when you blame the person, you yourself are displaying a lack of empathy. Just as they do not understand you, you do not understand them, which means that you lack empathy for them. Once again, that's not your fault. You can only empathise with that which you understand. What is your fault, on the other hand, is your lack of compassion for that person. Compassion is not an emotion. It is a much higher quality than any emotion can be. For someone who lacks empathy to show compassion is a greater achievement than someone who has empathy showing compassion, because one has a head start on the other. In that same sense, one who has a great deal of empathy but does not show compassion is committing a far more grievous crime than one who lacks empathy and shows no compassion, because the former should know better, whereas the latter does not. Evil does not lack empathy. On the contrary, evil understands exactly what it is doing. It understands exactly how it is making others feel. It simply doesn't care. The scary thing about evil is, you cannot empathise with evil, but evil can empathise with you. And the more it empathises with you, the further away you should run, if you can. So put very simply, empathy is to understand. Compassion is to care. When I say care, that doesn't mean to feel sorry for, it doesn't mean pity. Those are emotions. Compassion sees straight through emotions. Sympathy can give rise to compassion, just as empathy can, but so too can anger. Emotions have their place. They are oftentimes an integral part of the journey, but they are not the destination. The destination is compassion. Pity can often be very demeaning to a person. It's like you're trampling over their dignity, even though you don't mean to. And guess what? That's very uncompassionate. And likewise, if that person reacts negatively to your good intentions, then they too will be showing a lack of compassion. Conversely, there are some who crave your pity, who will fish for sympathy because they have a victim mentality. Giving these people the pity they want is not compassionate, because you're facilitating their bad habits and contributing to their downfall. If you truly care about someone, you don't do that. You have to know when to step over someone's boundaries and when not to. Compassion is to care about the well-being of other people and life forms, and to honour that care with your actions. The emotions are a good thing, but they must step aside for compassion. The emotions are like a crazy baying crowd, whereas compassion is the one calm person in the centre of it all, who must find equilibrium and lead by example. So it's easy to see how the lowering of empathy in the outer balance solar plexus leads to a lack of compassion, insensitivity, the type of person who sets out to hurt others and likes doing so. Such a person mirrors the demonic, and so the demonic takes them. Now the other pole of the heart is oversensitivity. As I explained in my original description of the poles of the heart chakra, oversensitivity leads to envy, hatred, bitterness, and entitlement. Sadly, this behaviour is usually the result of someone who genuinely has suffered a lot of abuse at the hands of insensitive types, feels rejected and slighted by society, and grows twisted and vengeful. It's born of a yang imbalance in the solar plexus, a lack of self-esteem. Like their yin counterparts, they reject compassion, although not quite to the same extent. It's more of a reaction to what they feel as society's lack of compassion towards them. In truth, it is self-love that these people cast into the shadow, often replacing it with an over-the-top, egoic personality, desperate for outward approval, and more resentful by the day. The more they want it, the less they have it. Now, it's very telling that the words self-love are given a negative description in dictionaries, and all the associated words and synonyms are pejorative terms associated with narcissism. This is absurd and ironic, considering that it is the rejection of self-love that leads to narcissistic behaviour, not the embracing of it. Even the word thick-skinned is given a bad rap. Oversensitive types tend to go in one of two directions. One, they obsessively preen and prune themselves and they try too hard for outward approval. Or two, they grow morbidly obese and they demand that everybody accepts them. The simple fact of the matter is, if they love themselves, they wouldn't need the approval of others. If they love themselves, they would take care of themselves and not neglect their physical and mental health, demanding that they be loved. Now, when these people reach the tipping point of their neurosis, they can become extremely dangerous. They will actively seek to hurt those who they feel haven't given them the recognition that they deserve, twisted with bitterness, envy and rage. So you can clearly see that the heart chakra dysfunctions are the most deadly of all chakra dysfunctions. It's clear to see why demons can possess these people, reveling no doubt in the corruption of once pure souls, as you would expect a demon to do. Now, the heart chakra being the centre, the event horizon or the mini black hole of the field, presents an interesting possibility. According to physicists, if you throw something into a black hole, let's say a book, all of the information, the properties of that book, will be replicated and stored in the surface of the black hole. Now, I don't know exactly how they work that out, but if it's true, then it reveals something quite significant. The heart chakra, being the black hole, would make the field the equivalent of the surface of the black hole, where all the information is stored. So if the entity that is possessing the host is occupying the black hole, aka the heart, then theoretically its information would be stored in the field. So maybe that is why from time to time you might get a little bleed through, perhaps a little glitch in the eyes or the mouth, or even a full-blown shapeshift. The field is essentially a giant ring or a halo which surrounds the body, so anything within that field would be subject to distortion. But even to say that it surrounds the body is not entirely accurate, because really what our five senses decode as our bodies are just projections from these fields. Our limited senses are very deceived. Understanding this, and understanding that the information is stored in the heart's field, shines further light on the word recalled, which literally means by heart. So the information is recorded in the field, quite literally. The film Wreck being about demons just makes more sense by the second. Now here's Eminem's recovery, using the medical symbol, but if you remove the cross, then that little red dot is the record symbol. And here's an alternative cover for recovery, with Eminem standing in the checkered corridor. No explanation needed. Staying on this same subject of the demonic entity's information literally being recorded in the field, emanating from the heart chakra, it adds yet another layer of meaning to that lyric from Beyonce's Sweet Dreams. Tattoo your name across my heart. Now, we know that it's inked on one level, as in Antichrist Inc., incorporated. But what is a tattoo if not a recording? The field even makes an appearance in the video. You can see it here emanating from Beyonce. And Sweet Dreams is right. The field is basically a dream field, because it projects an illusion, a deception that fools the senses. And the word dream comes from Proto-Germanic draumas, literally meaning deception, illusion, phantasm. A phantasm is an apparition, a spectre. That is exactly what this field projects. Spectres. Phantasm is the word that Plato used to describe objective reality as distorted by perception in his theory of forms. So this field really is a field of dreams. Notice the halo around Kevin Costner. Kind of hard not to, don't you think? And there are clouds in the background because the field is, after all, a probability cloud. If you build it, they will come. Yeah, they're talking about building this field, this halo. The temple, as Masons call it. It is a dream field, or a field of dreams. Another name for it is the dream coat, or the coat of many colours. It's biblical. Now here's the Jewish Andrew Lloyd Webber's Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And you'll note how Joseph is standing in front of the sun, so the halo is around him. And he appears also to be turning black, because to our eyes, anything above the visible light spectrum looks black. I'm fairly certain that is what is being symbolically communicated here. Now in the video for the song Any Dream Will Do, which is from this musical, Jason Donovan stands in the centre of a circle of children as it spins around. Once again, this is completely symbolic of the field technology. Just like the atom, the nucleus in the centre with electrons spinning around it. Jason Donovan in this case is Joseph, while the kids spinning around him are this field technology, cloaking his appearance, aka the coat of many colours. Continuing on this line of thought, I showed at an earlier point one of the names of the field is the halo, so it should come as no surprise that Beyonce has a song called Halo. Now this song is what appears to be a description of the passive form of possession. The active form is the three-stage process of infestation, oppression and possession. The passive form foregoes this process as the target is receptive to the demon. Often it's disguised as an angel of light. Some of the lyrics are, quote, "Remember those walls I built? Baby, they're tumbling down. And they didn't even put up a fight. They didn't even make a sound. I found a way to let you in, but I never really had a doubt. Standing in the light of your halo, I've got my angel now." Unquote. Well, as you know, the first thing that needs to happen for an entity to get in is a weakness in the outer field. So we're talking an imbalance in either the crown or the root. Sometimes both. Evidently, in this case, it seems to be the crown. As she says, "Standing in the light of your halo, I've got my angel now." Well, that indicates a crown yin imbalance. The projection of your inner divinity onto external people, entities, or even objects, caused by casting your divine spark into the shadow. She goes on to talk about feeling as if she has been awakened, which is standard when it comes to passive possession. People experience the typical euphoria and oneness, thinking that they're enlightened or illuminated. And she also says, "You know that you're my saving grace," which is further confirmation of a crown yin imbalance. The second verse continues, "Hit me like a ray of sun, burning through my darkest night. You're the only one that I want. Think I'm addicted to your light." So we're swaying now into third eye yin imbalance, which is what you would expect with passive possession. Third eye yin imbalance is characterized by a lack of discernment. Remember, these types are prone to bad decision making, not learning from their mistakes, and they very often have addictive personalities. They look for light in the darkness, which is why she says, "Hit me like a ray of sun, burning through my darkest night." An elegant metaphor, and I'm sure not consciously intended to imply what I'm suggesting it means, but remember, we're transcending context to reveal the spiritual message. And that message is clear. She was in the darkness, looking for the light, and she found it. But due to her third eye yin imbalance, was unable to discern that it was darkness that she found, posing as that light. She also said, "Think I'm addicted to your light." Another trait associated with third eye yin imbalance, addiction. The final part of the second verse continues, "I swore I'd never fall again, but this don't even feel like falling. Gravity can't begin to pull me back to the ground again." Okay, so two birds with one stone here. First of all, we're now venturing into extreme yin imbalance territory of the throat chakra, which follows naturally from the lack of discernment in the extreme yin of the third eye chakra. I swore I'd never fall again, but this don't even feel like falling. Well, this displays a lack of discernment, but there's a line in the bridge of the song in which she says, "Every rule I had you're breaking." Well, that means that the entity has effectively reshaped her mind, remoulded her belief system, overruled her previous worldview. Impressionability is an extreme yin throat chakra characteristic. So her lack of discernment has led to this entity tricking her into believing she is not falling, when in fact she is. It has made an impression on her now. So it's in the throat chakra, aka the third field. The next line of the song is, "Gravity can't begin to pull me back to the ground again." Well, this indicates very clearly that she is now ungrounded, a root chakra dysfunction. So the outer field has been completely dismantled. She has given her agency away to the entity, which is an extreme yin root chakra dysfunction. If you give someone control over your destiny, then they own you. Now, due to that fact, the entity can now access the heart for possession. There's a line in the bridge where she says, "I'm never going to shut you out." Well, that's how possession works. The host bonds their self to this Antichrist spirit in the heart, not only in this life, but the afterlife as well. The line's basically a precursor to the lines from her Sweet Dreams song. "Tattoo your name across my heart, not even death can make us part." It's all about the host pledging their heart to the demon. They substitute their own halo for the artificial halo of the entity. It's another way of saying that you're under the umbrella of the entity. The rain is the Father, God. The umbrella keeps you out of the rain, thus away from God, under the shadow of evil. Now when you're under the umbrella, you're owned. So you're also ungrounded. Therefore, you give up your connection to God above via the crown, and to Mother Earth below via the root. This is why Beyonce says, "Standing in the light of your halo." She has given up her light, her field, for the artificial light of the entity. She has become Sasha Fierce. The name Sasha has a few different meanings, one of which is merchant. It goes back to maritime law and trading in currency. Currency being human souls. The demon is of course the money in the piggy bank. The video for the song features a scene in which Beyonce is under the water wearing a wedding dress. Now, as you'll no doubt remember, the wedding dress relates to the alchemical wedding, the marriage of black and white. It's all that bonding oneself to the all or to Pan in the abyss, which is why she is under the water. She's giving herself to the Antichrist spirit in the abyss, reborn in the womb of Babylon, aka the water. Now, regarding the use of the word halo and how that specifically ties in with this field, I want to bring something to your attention. Angels are usually symbolically portrayed as having halos and wings. Well, looking at the field, it's not hard to see why. The crown, or corona, is the halo, while the adjacent sides of the torus field are the wings. Let's not forget also that the torus is the ball, which is another reason for the slogan, "Red ball gives you wings." If the ball is red, it implies the red torus, or the red field, which would be the bottom half of the outer field, the roots into the ground. The root and the crown are one and the same. So in that sense, the ball can be red, or the ball can be violet. You can go infrared, or ultraviolet. Anyway, Beyonce's field has been attenuated by what she calls her angel, but what I would assert is a demon, as after all, we are dealing with a woman who refers to this entity in her Sweet Dreams song as her guide and a beautiful nightmare, and this entity has supplanted her field with that of its own. She is bonded with it eternally. Make no mistake about it, to bond with the Antichrist spirit is bondage, and bondage is slavery. serfdom. The word bondage goes back to Old English bonda, meaning a householder. So you see, the possessed may be the head of the house, the householder or leaseholder, but that house, meaning vessel, is owned by the Antichrist spirit. Possession and selling the soul are synonymous, and those in bondage, meaning those who have sold their soul or bonded with the Antichrist spirit, are subject to visitations from that spirit whenever it chooses to do so. The connotation being that any time it wishes to manifest through you, it can, because the landlord can drop in on the householder any time they feel like it. The Lord in this case being the Lord of the Flies. The flies are the vessels, the hosts that it wields. The bread or Monsters Inc. They're flies because they are unclean vessels. Money pigs. Now if you look at the cover of Halo, there is a cross on display, hanging from a rosary. The rosary is a dedication to Mary, so it relates directly to maritime. Mary time. The rose, from which rosary gets its name, is a pagan symbol of the heart. The rosary itself relates to promises, so what is truly being related here on a symbolic level is a promise. For Catholics, the rosary represents 15 promises, supposedly from Mary to Christ's followers. In this case, it is a promise from Beyonce to the entity, a pledging of the soul, no doubt. The rosary being a heart, the cross means cross my heart and hope to die. Cross my heart is the promise, and of course it's the heart itself which is promised to the entity, which is why Eminem's wearing the cross on the recovery poster, and it's also why the cross is placed over the record symbol. The record symbol is the heart being crossed and a promise to the entity to give it your heart. As I'm sure you will recall, the original Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics features a heart on the front cover, gift wrapped for the entity. Same concept, different song. Although Beyonce basically says the same symbolic thing in her Sweet Dreams song. Well, same is true of Halo. This is why it's so important to protect your heart, your centre. It's also why I equate love with balance. The heart chakra is the vector equilibrium in the centre of the 64 tetra grid. Equilibrium being the key word. Balance. So love is not stepping on eggshells and trying not to offend people. That's oversensitivity, which is an imbalance, which is the opposite of love. Truly compassionate people shouldn't have to parade around lecturing others about how they should be more loving and compassionate. There's nothing loving or compassionate about that. The more hypersensitive you expect others to be, more often than not, the more insensitive they will become in response to you expecting perfection from them. It's very unreasonable. In trying too hard to be compassionate, you often become very uncompassionate because you mistake your biased emotions for compassion. Like I said before, compassion is not an emotion. Compassion is a virtue. Know thyself, be thyself, love thyself. Now, all things being fractal, as above, so below, as within, so without, let's take the principles of the chakras and apply them on a national level, so that we can see how the Kenite psychopaths are attacking national sovereignty. So we're going from the individual to the nation.